Cliven Bundy's story begins long before 2014. For decades, his family had grazed cattle on the public lands surrounding their ranch in southeastern Nevada. These lands were owned by the federal government, but Bundy, and many other ranchers, believed that this land was theirs to use as part of their heritage. For 21 years, Bundy had refused to pay grazing fees to the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, claiming that the government had no authority over these lands. The BLM disagreed and took Bundy to court, ultimately demanding over $1 million in back fees. To the Bundys, this wasn't just about money, it was about principle. About whether the government had the right to control land that had been used by ranchers for generations. By April 2014, tensions had reached a boiling point. The federal government, determined to collect the fees, sent armed BLM agents and law enforcement officers to seize Bundy's cattle. In response, Cliven Bundy's supporters, many of them local ranchers, farmers, and militia groups, rallied to his cause. What began as a legal dispute quickly escalated into a full-blown confrontation. As law enforcement officers moved in to round up the cattle, the supporters of Bundy, heavily armed and standing their ground, made it clear that they were not backing down. The standoff lasted for several days, drawing national attention. Protesters lined the roads, waving American flags and demanding an end to what they saw as federal overreach. For many, this was no longer about Bundy's unpaid grazing fees. It was about standing up against a government that was seen as increasingly willing to infringe on personal freedoms. At its core, the Bundy standoff raises an important question. How far can the government go in regulating the land and lives of its citizens? In the case of Bundy, the BLM claimed the right to enforce federal grazing laws on land they owned. But Bundy and his supporters argued that the government's control over these lands infringed on their rights and livelihoods. This wasn't just a fight over cows or grazing fees. It was about personal autonomy. Many saw the BLM's actions as a reflection of a much larger problem, the overreach of a powerful federal government that, some argue, is too eager to impose regulations on individuals and communities. The Bundy standoff serves as a reminder that the power of the government must be held in check. While the BLM claims to represent the public interest, there's a growing concern that government agencies are becoming more powerful and less accountable. When citizens like Cliven Bundy and his supporters stand up against this power, they are not just fighting for their own livelihoods. They're fighting for the rights of all Americans to control their own property, their own futures, and their own lives. In the end, the federal government backed down and Bundy's cattle were returned to him. However, the legal battle continued. Bundy and his supporters saw this as a victory not just for his ranch, but for the principle of limited government and individual rights. Yet the fight wasn't over. Bundy was eventually arrested and faced charges related to the standoff, and the question of how to balance government control with individual freedoms remains an ongoing debate in the United States. The Bundy standoff is a story of resistance against a government that many felt had crossed the line. It's a story of ordinary people standing up for their rights, their land, and their freedom. And while the specifics of the case may be behind us, the underlying question persists. How do we ensure that government remains accountable to the people it serves? As citizens, it's our responsibility to speak out when we believe our freedoms are at risk, and to ensure that our government remains one that works for us, not against us. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Do you think the Bundy Ranch incident was government overreach?